in my opinion. And so I've stuck with Lugers. I have a couple of 1911s that I like, and like you, various other things that I've picked up. But yeah, so how'd you get into it?
So, as a young man, for reference, I'm only 29, and I had great grandparents and grandparents that served in World War II, but none of them really brought back any weapons or trophies. Although one of my great grandfathers actually was a police chief. I didn't get to inherit it, but he did have a Smith 38 Special 5-shot revolver that he gave to one of my uncles. But I
Ah,
remember having many conversations with them, and I think it's a real and underappreciated aspect, especially for people in my generation and younger, of the video games to gun collecting pipeline. And so I vividly remember having a PC, a computer, desktop back in the day. And when the first Call of Duty came out, I remember reading through the manual about how Lugers were this big prize and like everybody wanted it. And then Band of Brothers came on, and I was watching Band of Brothers in the aftermath of 9/11 and young enough to understand it. And I saw all the characters going after Lugers, and it really fascinated me with all of my family that had served over there, even though none of them brought anything back. And so that's
I'm
what
the
really
same
got
way. Yep.
and so that's what really got me into it. And so as a child, I always, and I mean, I was so to the point that I would play the game purposely, like looking for the gun in the game just to carry it around, even if it was rather useless in the context of the video game. And I always wanted one. And then when I was 21, about to turn 22, I finally found my first one. There's this perception that Lugers are rarer than they actually are, especially in the States. We forget that production wise, some 3 million of the guns are made. They're not by any stretch of
Yeah.
the imagination a rare produced gun, but they have such an aura, mystique, and collectability that by and large, when you see them, they still command fairly high prices for a non-rare gun, just because that's where they are. And I've since sold the first one that I purchased. It was, and this partially influenced where I was. I have no military connections, but the first one I bought was an early 1920, still had the 5-digit, not an alphabet, but a 5-digit 1920 commercial. And I didn't even realize that they made commercial pistols. I'd always known them from the German army. But the quality and feel of the commercial guns, because I know that as I did more and more research, like you said, how they really get into it, and how detailed and craftsman like old world craftsmanship was. I went to a Roman Catholic church, and like the altar and all of the backdrop wood was done by German craftsmen in the late 1800s. So I was familiar with that quality of workmanship, but just to see the Luger as gunsmith's art in the commercial sense, more so than the military sense, really influenced me. And that's why I really like the commercial, especially pre World War One commercial and contract. That's really my wheelhouse of collecting.
Ah, yeah. Well, obviously Dwight, our friend, he likes that kind of stuff too.
Yes, very much so.
But
And I'm like,
it's an interesting hobby, and it's just like you said. We get into it for different reasons, and there's just a lot to learn about them. I don't think most people realize that they served in three huge generations.
yeah, like I say, obviously World War One and Two, but then everyone forgets the reworks into the Cold War with East Germany and even into the Soviet. I mean, they were in Soviet storage for a while, but it's not. They were passed out as foreign aid. Like your veteran bringbacks book talks about people that bring them home from Vietnam and Korea as they're passed out as foreign aid to the other communist countries. We've seen them now turn up from when RTI went to Ethiopia. We've seen them turn up in the Ethiopian arms stashes for import to the United States. So we
Yeah,
know that they
that was interesting. Yeah,
it makes sense. I mean, think about the Aswan High Dam, and Egypt and Ethiopia aren't that far from each other. It's not that far fetched to think that they found their way across Africa from Egypt, especially
yeah.
during all the myriad wars with Israel in the region and stuff like that. So, or also obviously the French down there in Algeria, because we know the French took many of them home with them, and they served in French colonial forces. That's how a lot of them also got to Vietnam, was in service with the French colonial soldiers.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, what do you have that's interesting that you could show us?
I'm sorry, Ed, I couldn't hear you there. You were cutting out.
What do you have to show us today?
I'm sorry, one more time. This is bad podcasting, but I actually can't hear you at all. I
It's
can see you
okay. Yeah,
talking.
I'll be able to. mess with it and such. Well, what you're collecting stuff now? What do you have that you can show us?
It's being really roboty. I'm really, really sorry. I was gonna say I just can't hear what you're saying. I don't know if there's an audio problem or anything like that, but I can see you talking. I just can't hear what you're saying.
Sure. What kind of guns do you have? I'm looking just to see what it's doing.
Is it a problem with my audio or anything like that?
It was doing feedback.
Let me see if it's something with my audio over here. It could just be me. Let's go to my. Let's see if that works a little bit better. If I can put this onto my computer instead.
And in chat.
There we go. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, of course. I would be happy to show you guns. So let's start earliest to latest here. So for the earliest one I have, like I told you, you actually turned me onto this one from your good friend Lynn Islob's collection. So this is one of the earliest Lugers, the model 1900. So as you can see, it has the dished toggles here instead of the full-on. I'll show you a later one here instead of the knurled. So it has the dished toggles right through here, not all the way knurled like the later ones are. And then it also on this side, it has, because this has flat springs instead of coil springs, it has the latch here, the toggle lock, so that when the gun when it goes down, it physically locks back in that way. And then that's what kept it down there until later coil springs got it in. This one is from about 1903 or so. We can date the serial number through some friends that I have that have been looking at similar serial numbers and contract dates. Our friend Douglas Aguilar on the forum has actually found some interesting model 1900s that made their way to Brazil as part of a Brazilian Marine contract that he's working on. But similar serial number range, and it shows up in 1903, so that's what we can date this one to. This one is in beautiful shape. It's a real looker. You can see it's called an American Eagle because it has the eagle over there on the crest. That's what gives it away. The Germany import mark on a commercial Luger. So this was made for the civilian market. It's not one of the U.S. test numbers. It doesn't fall in that serial range. But 30 caliber Luger, most of these were made in 30 caliber. There's some called fat barrels that were a 9mm for their much fatter barrel. Like this is a military one. You can see it has a much, much fatter barrel comparatively to the pencil barrel of the American Eagle here on the left. And so my left, your right probably. But anyways, this is, for a long time, this was my favorite. It's still, the biggest thing about this one is the strawing is just gorgeous. So that straw, that golden color there on the small parts, that fades rather quickly, especially with contact. And in this case, this gun, it's near mint straw. Like, I don't know I've seen better straw on a gun. It's one of my favorite parts about it. It is absolutely beautiful. Even my wife, who is not necessarily a gun person, commented, she's like, the golden parts look like they're almost untouched when I first bought this.
Yeah.
So it stood out to that point even for her. And I really, really like this. And then also you see up here, it has the original flat style extractor up and through here compared to later they rounded that off as for parts reliability and for strength. But this is a good example of an old model Luger. It also has what's called a long frame. So the frame down here is slightly longer comparatively to this one right here. You can see a slightly shorter, more abruptly rounded off frame, whereas this is a lot more of a longer, more gently sloped frame in there. That would eventually be eliminated for weight savings and for production purposes. But no, this is a beautiful example of an early Luger, and it's one of the two major crown jewels. You'll see the other one here in just a second. This is one of the two major crown jewels in my collection. I really, really like this one a lot.
Nice.
So I was going to say, if you want to go ahead and show one off here, we'll go one at a time. That way people get a good...
No, I'm just, we're showing off your guns.
Oh, wonderful.
I don't have any I grabbed.
Understood. Well, chronologically in that case, the next one here would be, again, getting into my side collection. So this is the Browning vest pocket. A lot of people might know that because Colt made them as well. And this is Anthony Vanderlinden's FN Browning books are excellent for this. The same Colt vest pocket, even though FN and Colt had a marketing agreement to not show or to not market each other's guns and not compete, FN took continental Europe and their colonies. Colt took the United States, Canada, and they both competed over Great Britain. And then Colt also usually had South America, or they could compete in South America, but Colt usually won there. The same Colt vest pocket drawings were given to FN, and it's one of the only guns that both Colt and FN produced pretty much as is. They didn't really make all that many alterations. The only major alterations were that FN, in the very initial models, they got rid of this here grip safety. They decided to put it back on there in later guns, like from I think it was 1908 or 09 onwards. And then they also decided to make the trigger here. They decided to add these little things. Colts don't have this little part to the trigger, but FNs do have this particular little the flares here to the trigger. And then FN chose to have their safety more like this, whereas the Colt safety is a little bit different style. But very cosmetic minor differences. Many of the parts interchange. A 25 ACP, this gun, I can trace its manufacture thanks to Van der Linden's excellent books to about 1912 based on its markings. So this is also a pre-World War I make FN pistol. And these were really popular for private purchase by military, especially high-ranking officers. The old adage, the higher the rank, the smaller the gun, applies to this kind of thing. And then same thing. This was also an extremely popular civilian model with almost 1 million of these pistols in particular produced by FN when production ceased. New production realistically ceased about the time of World War II, and it never continued. They simply made guns out of the existing parts inventory all the way up into the 1950s. But we see serial numbers into the 1 million mark. But this one I actually got somewhat recently in Louisville. It's really, really clean. I just found this on a table, and it was in remarkably good shape. Just a little bit of carry wear over here on this side, but really not a whole lot. This side is almost in perfect shape. I was really, really pleased to get a hold of this one. And again, this is just my side collection quest of the little FN pocket Brownings. It's fun to think that this was a concealed carry gun for so many people, for bankers, for little ladies, or for officers all alike. And there's no markings that indicate what this was, so no import marks could have been picked up by someone just going through Belgium during the World Wars and they turned in their guns, the soldiers went through. It could have been carried by some officer in either World War and been relieved of duty by a U.S. soldier. It was used on both sides. It was popular among German and Allied officers because they just like the small, compact size and reliability of Browning designs. We'll never really honestly get to know because there's no paperwork with it. I just have the gun. But
sure.
It's a beautiful little piece, and it's the centerpiece of my Browning collection, of which I have a few others. But I really, really like this one a lot, too. It really shows off the quality of FN pre-war.
Great.
So, do you have any questions about either of those two before we move on?
No, I'm good.
All right, so compare those. Those are commercials. I also, DWM as a commercial manufacturer, even though they had subsidies for the German military. Actually, I forgot to mention one more thing, just because this is another rarer part of the collection. For that 1900, the holsters are hard to come by, but I also happened to come across through a good friend of ours, Brandon Metcalf. He actually found an original model 1900 civilian holster for me, an original one, and this is in absolutely beautiful shape. The leather is still really, really supple.
And brown. A lot of them were dyed black.
Yeah, still brown. All the leather is supple and still works. The stitching is intact and wonderful. All the buttons still work. All that. It's a really, really nice holster, and one that you don't find a whole lot of here in the United States. But it goes well with the model 1900 here. It's specifically for the model 1900. It works with an 06, but it's meant specifically for the model 1900. And it's actually a really, really nice thing to have in the collection there to go with it for those of us that are accessories fans.
Oh, yeah, I like it. I like accessories, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I'm still getting into them personally. I'm still young enough that the guns are first priority, and then we worry about the accessories later.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
When it comes back to the Luger here, as we most commonly know, my son is making a lovely appearance there in the background. If you can hear them, he's having a tough time here. So the German Army tested this here, and they were impressed with the Luger pistol, but requested a few changes. Namely, they wanted some weight out of the frame, which they took out of the longness of the frame here. Elimination of the grip safety because they didn't find it useful. They wanted to exchange the flat springs in here for a different, stronger spring. That's a coil spring, which I'm not going to be taking the grips off, but there's a coil spring in there, and a few other things that we know of today. And so through testing, what happened is in late 1908, they adopted the P08, the Pistol 08. And this is a DWM model from 1914. DWM, Deutsche Waffen- und Munitionsfabriken, was a commercial entity out of the Ludwig Lovo company. They rebranded as DWM when they acquired more stuff. And they got the contract for Lugers, and then there was the Royal Prussian Rifle Factory at Erfurt that would go on to make them, eventually selling. I believe Erfurt is who sold it to they're tooling to Simpson, right?
They got their equipment from them, yes.
Yes. But DWM, and part of the contract was that DWM would make their guns to commercial specifications. So especially like this one is a 1914 dated, and by serial, this should have been made right at around the time Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, sometime in late May, early June 1914. So the pre-war guns especially are still made to incredibly high craftsmanship and quality. But unlike the commercial ones, what you'll see here is the commercials don't seem to have numbering all over them. You'll notice that most of the numbering is, if it's there, it's on the bottom. Let's see if it shows up there. Like on the bottom of the side plate, you see the numbering there.
Yep.
The ability to request it to be far more open on there, so you'll see it like directly on the side plate, on the lever. You'll also see it. This one has British capture marks. That's some of the extra marks on there, but you see a lot more open numbering all over the gun. But this one is a 1914. As a pre-war gun, is one of the few military P08s that I have, just because it fits in that same commercial quality and guidelines. It's really a nice piece in its own right. I was able to find this. Louisville has been very kind to me, as long as you know what you're looking for. And I find the British proofs fascinating because it very, 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 very laxly adheres to a lot of the 1919 to 1920 regulations. And because it also, and I don't have any more with me that have the altered sear bar, but because it still has the unaltered long sear bar, this tells me it was captured early on in World War I and never went through. And for British proofs, they're actually quite discreet. You can see the obvious ones on the barrel, but beyond that, like a lot of the other British proof marks, like you see up here right above the DWM logo, we'll see if it zooms in on there. There's like a little crown V for the British, because the British, every gun that went through Britain had to get reproofed, even if the German or American ones were superior to British proofs. The British they make you go through it all. But it's in the same spot that you would expect to see the Revisions Commission works on Erfurts, the Crown RCs, which were relatively rare on DWMs, and that's what I at first mistook them for. But it's in a lot of the same areas that you would find the Crown RC marks, and then you almost don't even realize it. It says not English make here on the side rail, but when I was first looking at it, it just looked like it was like standard holster wear, like it had been, scuffed up. Like there's a little bit of grip damage, like it was, damaged in battle or something like that. But as a military PO8, it's in honest but very nice condition. I'm very happy with it. And this is an example of the German PO8 as issued by the military that went through all the military systems. And so this is like the one that most people think of when they think collector PO8s. They usually think of the military, like pure military ones, and this one is it. I'm a really big fan of this one. Again, I like my pre-war stuff, and it still happens to fit that mold and go through all of those specifications, and it's a really nice piece in its own right. And so as I go along, I'm sure I'll find upgrades for it without British proof marks or anything like that, but it's a wonderful, wonderful little gun and nothing to scoff at in any given collection here for a Luger collector who would want, because 1914s are kind of hard to come by.
Yeah, excellent.
And then last but not least, and the one that I got from Tim, and this one is very similar to one you gave me from Lynn, it's a Screamer. Part of the DWM contract with the initial PO8s was that they also, for officers in the German military, were required to arm themselves and were required to purchase their own armaments, their own equipment, like uniforms, everything on down was required to be purchased out of pocket for them. And that meant that they also had wide latitude in what handgun they could buy. It was just up to them, and it was preferred if their handguns came in some of the readily available German service cartridges that they could get through the depot system, like 32 ACP or the new 9mm Parabellum or anything like that. So what DWM did is, through their commercial range, there was a contract for 25,000 of the PO8 specifications, the initial one. So this one has a stock lug here, even though there was no stock. This was just a a production thing, so they didn't have multiple assembly lines for stock lug and non-stock lug pistols. But in 1908 to 1909, DWM contracted and promised 25,000 of these pistols to the German military so that officers could purchase that way it wasn't the same as buying it through their version of Cabela's, or wasn't the same as buying it through, whatever. They didn't have to go buy it through a local gun store for full price. The German military would give them a discount by buying the commissioned service pistol, but made to P08 specifications. And so this is one of those P08 commercials. And like I said, it is in absolutely pristine condition here. So you can tell from that it's early pre-1912 because it still has the Crown BUG marks, Crown bug proofs up and through here, whereas in 1912 they switched to the Crown N, the nitro proof. Same thing on the bottom of the barrel there. Like a commercial P08, it's commercially numbered, so all the numbers are in the hidden style underneath the side plate, underneath the locking bolt there, stuff like that, or hidden on the underside of parts. Like the extractor up here is going to have it in the hidden areas, stuff like that. And it does not have the stock lug at all, so it has what's called a slick back here, unnumbered commercial bottom magazine. And this one, the other thing that gives it away, so the initial P08 contract, if you were to, like most P08s, if you do this, make sure the magazine is all the way seated there, they will hold open like this on an empty magazine, and so that's how you can make sure that it is empty. The private contract ones are to initial P08. That was actually a retrofit in 1913 is when they mandated that all P08s that didn't have it get it back, because at first it was cost savings, and then they found that having that hole open was rather important because too many people were going click on empty mags. But the first issues and the officer ones, unless they went back to Erfurt, and this one did not to get the retrofit, it simply does not have the hold open function. So this gun does not have a hold open. And so that's one of the giveaways that it went to an officer and was not for commercial purchase by a civilian in any way, shape, or form, is that there is no hold open on this particular gun. And then secondly, in this one, let's see if it captures it in there. There should be a PRV marking that you can see.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've never had one of those.
Yeah, so the PRV or just the letter P, either one, for similar to the Swiss, for private purchase. So this one, at least to the best of our knowledge, our friend Dwight has mentioned that some of these ended up on American Eagle Lugers in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure how that happened, but a lot of other renowned Luger collectors and experts, several of them have openly stated that until they see otherwise proof, the PRV or P sign simply means privately purchased Luger. And so by all accounts, even though it doesn't have a name or anything on it, this gun was probably carried by a German officer into World War I. And from the looks of it, not unholstered or shot very much, because there's not even a whole lot of like toggle slap on the back saying that it was shot much, and much less incredibly minimal wear on it. So this one is, again, the prize. This fits the perfect nexus of my collecting interests. Pre-war but military, made to complete commercial specifications. The fit and finish on the tolerances when I take this apart are absolutely fantastic. It's almost as if this gun is still practically new in box, or hardly carried, or hardly shot. It's really, really nice, and I'm really, really pleased with this particular one. The grips are incredibly aggressively textured still. There's not a whole lot of wear on the grips either. So this is the one that I probably like the single most in my collection, that fits the nexus of my pre-World War I but military use and private commercial contract.
Well, I would imagine that if somebody had it in a holster and carried it, it would still have holster wear. So that must have been bought, put aside,
It does. It still has a little bit of high edge wear over here on the top of the side plate. That's one of the giveaways. Same thing. You can still see a little bit of high edge wear.
Yeah, but barely anything. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it looks as if this gun was left in someone's holster for quite some time and just not often drawn. And you'll see some of them that are unit marked. You'll see some of them that have engravings of the name or initials. Like I saw one for sale recently that had a lowercase v.l for Von something, Von L, something like that, on the back of the grip strap. Our friend has another one from 1914. The 1914 commercials just have the Crown N, and then some of the later commercials prior to World War I, like right before the war started, will also have that stock lug. And that one has the full last name, like engraved, like jeweler engraved right at this part of the gun.
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one is really nice. Like I said, it's a great example of something that was carried by an officer, but probably not drawn in a whole lot of scenarios, and then probably turned in more so than tossed in a pile at the end of the war in some way, shape, or form. So
Right. Exactly. Well, no, that's great. I thought this would be a great opportunity to be able to share among collectors.
yes, absolutely. The other fun thing that came with this is that when I bought it, it came with one of the correct private purchase commercial holsters. So this is just an unmarked Luger holster. I simply had the information in that baggie there from who I bought it from and all the FFL information, stuff like that. But it's just an unmarked Luger holster uh, commercial Luger holster. There we go. It would technically fit one of these if I really wanted it to. Like that would fit within this holster, one of the 1900s. They have a longer barrel as well, in case you couldn't see that earlier. A P08 has a 4-inch barrel. The original ones have a 4 3/4 inch barrel. So, but the commercial holsters would also fit a 1906 or a 1908 if we had one of those. I just happen to have a 1900. That and a 1906, there's minor differences. Basically, for a 1906, just imagine this, but with a toggle that looks more like this. And for all intents and purposes, it looks slightly more like this, but with the same barrel length as this. Um, but yeah, so I have the holster with it, and then more impressively, because these are somewhat hard to find, is it has, pull it out here, the tool that came with it. Rather than be a military mark tool, it's got the P on it for private purchase commercial tool, and he happened to have one of those that I got with the gun. And these P mark
I
tools.
don't. You may need to send that to Dwight to have pictures taken of it. We
Well,
don't
I
have one
tried.
for the book.
I was gonna say, I believe I had one in there. There's been a couple. Our good friend Klaus on the forum also has a lot of these, and he verified that this is a completely legit private purchase tool. But yeah, you have a tool here, and then there's a P mark on that tool. I believe. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it.
Yep. And so that P mark goes with the gun here. So I have holster, tool, gun. I still need to get a cleaning rod though. That's going to be the hard part, is finding a correct cleaning rod for that. But yeah, it was a nice little rig and present for myself here as we get close to Father's Day.
I hear that.
So yeah, Ed, it's been a pleasure sharing these. Do you have any questions about these? Like I said, I know that you're far more into the police Lugers, and that would be way up your wheelhouse. But did you have any other questions about these and stuff like that you would want to know?
No, not really. Excellent presentation.
Like I said, I do my best to be informed. I think that's the biggest thing for people if they want to get especially deep into the collecting thing, is that you need to maintain your information. I do a lot of that through networking on the forums. I also have the Gertz and Sturgis volume that I've read front to back and back to front a few times here. Same thing for my FNs. I have Anthony Vanderlinden's books to help me out with that, and try to make sure at least I know like what I'm looking for, what I'm talking about. And the other thing is that people need to not be afraid to reach out. You need to find a good support network, but not be afraid to reach out if you are unsure or need help in verifying a gun that you really want to buy. So like if you are unsure if this was a private purchase commercial, like make sure you have good trusted friends that won't buy it out from underneath of you, and then ask them about it. Make sure that it's legit, that it's okay, that there's not people faking it, because of course people will fake what they think they can make a lot of money on.
Sure. Now, does that add a lot of value to it being a private purchase, or only to certain collectors?
I'm sure it adds a little bit to, especially to certain collectors. Like for me, that's right up my niche and up my alley. But for people who purely want military guns, they would want the peace of mind that comes with this one being pure military dated in 1914 and stuff like that.
Sure.
I happen to think, based on what we've seen from recent sale prices, these seem to command a particular premium because they're pretty well documented through DWM and German military records of having had these, especially within the correct serial range for this one does reside in. So I think it does add a little bit of value, especially because if it was an officer, there's also the idea that a German officer, not some NCO or sergeant, but like someone lieutenant or above definitely carried this, and there's a high chance that officer was probably at least a minor nobleman in some way, shape, or form, and that added mystique adds value to it. But for example, despite this being in beautiful condition and numbers-wise far more rare than even this 1914, the 1914 military gun will command a higher price or a similar price in lesser condition to this gun. Like these two guns are probably similar in price, even though this one is very almost pristine, and this one has lots of nicks and dings and is less ostensibly rare than the American Eagle, just because it's military cannon.
Exactly. Yeah. And then World War II ones are worth even more to a lot of people.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's just it's interesting being in the hobby and learning all this kind of stuff.
And I think it's really odd that the World War One guns are so undervalued, given that the vast majority of World War One guns that got collected, well, they got collected because they stayed in inventory and then found their way into German service in World War Two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's not as if they weren't in World War Two. It's just that they were made in World War One. And I happen to like, I also, and this is just a personal preference, a lot of, especially the later on into World War II guns, instead of doing the strawing here as a time saver, they started to dip blue, and then they're just similar to this where everything is blued or in the black. That was just FN style preferences. But for Lugers in about mid-1937, they get rid of all of the strawing and they just go straight to the dip blues from the 1937 Mausers onward. And I just happen to not like that look. I just happen to much prefer the look of the strawed parts guns, but that's a personal preference thing.
Sure. Well, I'm going to let you go and I'll do some work on this. So it'll probably take me 3 to 6 months, but I'll mess with it. It won't take me that long, but I'll mess with it. I've actually been working really hard on a tool book that myself and Justin are working on.
Yes, I was going to say, yeah, I've heard that you and Justin are working on a tool, but Justin lives actually not too far from me. I live in the Charleston area, and he lives in Georgetown, just about 45 minutes north of me. So he actually works not too far from here, and so sometime I was going to try to, especially now that I'm a teacher and it's summertime, I was going to try to get down and go catch lunch with him one of these times or something like that and go hang out and talk with him.
Well, we're up to 154 pages on it.
Yes. Well, and it's about time that when was the last new Luger publication that came out?
Oh, I'm not sure. Police Lugers has been 8 or 9 years now, probably.
And that was probably the last.
And I don't know who was the last person that came out with something. Probably Sturgis. His came out about 9 or 10 years ago too.
I was gonna say it probably have to be the Gertz and Sturgis volume. So, because Still was what 2005, 2006, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a while, and so I'll be looking forward to the new publications that come out dedicated to them, just to help spur interest. Because if you're not writing new books or disseminating new information, then it's not advancing the hobby long term. And so it'd be nice to see, even if tools and accents and adjacents, that'll be very nice to see come along and have a new book to spur a new collector interest or get more people into the hobby, even if only adjacently through the tools. And I know several tool collectors that have large collections of just Luger tools, obviously Lugers themselves, but lots of tools.
Yeah, I've only got 50, so.
I just have 3. I've got that P-marked one. I actually have one that's Crown X marked that goes with the 1914 Luger. And then I just have a standard 1920 commercial. That when I go to the range, I do have 2 shooters, one in 30 cal, one in actually GT. Gerald Tomek, he built me a Navy in 9mm. And so
I've got one of those too. And it's of course if GT does it, they always just work.
Oh, they always run like a top. Same thing. I had GT look over my 30 cal and make sure it runs. But I keep that one tool that's just a beater 1920 commercial tool so I can load the mags up for when I go to the range.
I have a tool on my key ring every day. I really do. I've used it for lots of stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's a useful little tool. I mean, the Germans weren't stupid. Waste not, want not was a big motto of theirs, and you see a lot of their tools serve multiple purposes.
Yep.
So.
Well, I'm going to let you go because I need to go watch Jeopardy.
I understand. Ed, it was a pleasure seeing and talking with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks, Quentin. You take care.
You as well, Ed. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.